pass. These protests have succeeded both to obtain the recanting of the law on foreign agents and mark thus a victory of democracy, and to demonstrate the capacity of the Georgian society to overcome polarization when united around a common goal. In that sense, the process of national reconciliation has started. Our path to democracy and towards European and Euro-Atlantic integration, enshrined in our Constitution, is the basis for our stability and has no alternative. I would like to reiterate Georgia's resolute pledge towards building a stronger democracy and express our readiness to work with all our global partners in building a more democratic, peaceful, and resilient world, in which Georgia will find its place as a trusted partner.
Seychelles.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in any society, democracy can only thrive when basic human rights are respected. These rights are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These are the basis for creating a society where we can live in peace and harmony. Democracy and good governance can only flourish where such a foundation is to be found. However, we note that there is no perfect model of democracy. I personally see democracy in a permanent state of evolution for the betterment of our people and communities. Central to democracy building is the relationship between leaders and the citizens. As elected leaders, we are simply the custodians of the power the people have entrusted us with. Delivering on our promises to govern in the interests of the people and remain accountable to them is the only way to maintain the trust of those who elected us. Seychelles is in that position of transition, and we have some experience to share with others. But we still have plenty to learn. In fact, we are all to learn from best practices around us and from past experience in order to perfect our own system of governance. We are constantly doing that, and this is why on the African continent, we are top on the Mo Ibrahim Index. Transparency International puts us as the least corrupt African country, and we head the Freedom of Media Index. We are trying our very best not to regress, but to move forward. What has been the Seychelles experience in democracy building? Having been myself involved in it for over 3 decades, I must say that this journey, which started 47 years ago with my country's accession to independence, has been a long, tortuous, and bumpy ride to freedom. Barely 1 year into its existence, our nascent democracy was stifled when a coup d'etat in 1977 ushered in an era of 43 years of undemocratic rule. The coup d'etat killed our burgeoning democracy and left behind unhealed wounds. In order to unify the country and heal the wounds of the past, the Truth, Reconciliation, and National Unity Commission was established in 2017 to investigate and settle claims of illegal imprisonment, torture, disappearances, arbitrary arrest, forced land acquisitions, and other alleged human rights abuses stemming from the regime of the 1977 coup d'etat. The adoption of a new constitution in 1993 and the transition of power to the opposition in the legislative branch of government for the first time in 2016 since 1977 were some important milestones in our long road to democracy. Democracy building led to the establishment of several significant democratic institutions. In 1993, for example, the Office of the Ombudsman was created and has since been contributing to the process of good governance, transparency, and accountability. In 2016, the National Assembly of Seychelles passed legislation establishing the first independent anti-corruption commission with investigative powers. In the same year, laws were passed to strengthen the country's legal anti-corruption framework. In 2018, the Seychelles Human Rights Commission, an independent and self-governing body, was formed to promote and protect human rights. The Access to Information Act, adopted in 2018, led to the creation of an information commission with the responsibility to provide government information and resources to citizens for particular disclosures. All these measures and our citizens' aspirations for democracy added momentum to the democratic movement that culminated in the peaceful transfer of power after 43 years of the same party in office following the October 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections. This historical achievement reflects our country's strong democratic values and remains a model to be followed by many other countries. Seychelles is the 12th smallest country in the world in terms of land area. We are also one of the youngest nations, the first human settlement in our country having been established only 2.5 centuries ago. And we have barely half a century of experience in statehood. Despite the bumpy journey, or perhaps because of it, our democracy has come of age. We have a lot to learn from other democracies, but we also have a lot to share from our experience in democracy building. We firmly believe that as a nation that respects and defends human rights, upholds the rule of law and supports accountable and transparent governance for all, we have the necessary tools to tackle even the most challenging of situations. In that sense, Seychelles is, I believe, on the right track. I thank you.
Tanzania.
Your Excellency Joseph Biden, President of the United States of America, Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, co-chairing the 2023 Summit for Democracy, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I feel greatly honored on behalf of the government and the people of the United Republic of Tanzania to be invited to participate in this Summit for Democracy that is being co-chaired by the United States of America, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, Republic of Korea, and our brotherly neighbor, the Republic of Zambia. I wish to commend His Excellency President Biden and his administration for continuous championing democracy, human rights, good governance, and rule of law around the world. Tanzania welcomes this summit, which avails us an opportunity to review the pledges made in the 2021 summit on how to strengthen democracy, promote respect for human rights, and uphold good governance in our countries. Your Excellencies, the founder of our nation realized the importance of democracy a long time ago, that the people must make the decisions about their own future through democratic procedures, that leadership cannot replace democracy. It must be part of democracy. So they embrace it even during a one-party system. The decision to embrace multi-party democracy in 1992, though unpopular at that time, was a necessary undertaking for the government. Since then, Tanzania has successfully conducted a total of 6 multi-party general elections, with the latest being held in 2020. Currently, like many other countries, our country is working hard to strengthen, refine, and consolidate its democracy so that it meets the aspirations of its people and the world at large. Your Excellencies, since March 2021, the government has embarked on an ambitious but necessary mission to continue strengthening our democracy, In December 2021, we began intensive consultation with stakeholders on the future of multi-party democracy in Tanzania. The task force was established to look into the matter and came up with the recommendations on how best to achieve that objective. Among the recommendations are reforming the legislation on national elections and political parties, as well as reviewing the constitution, which aimed at creating a conducive environment for free and fair election. I can gladly inform you that our government is already working on and implementing some of those recommendations. For instance, the government is already working on amending the electoral laws. Similarly, a ban on political rallies and meetings has been lifted in January this year, just as we did previously with the reopening of the banned media outlets. Political reconciliation is also underway under my 4 R's agenda, which stood for reconciliation, resilience, reforms, and rebuilding. I've made it clear to my fellow citizens that building democracy is everyone's responsibility, regardless of their political ideologies. Your Excellencies, democracy can only thrive where human rights are respected and rule of law is observed. Our government has then given high priority the promotion of human rights in the country, and restrictions on the enjoyment of human rights have been removed. The government has also launched a 3-year legal aid campaign to ensure access to justice for all in Tanzania. Equally important, the government has set up a commission for reviewing the criminal justice systems, whose recommendations will undoubtedly improve the dispensation of justice in the country. At the same time, we're intensifying the fight on corruption and enhancing transparency and accountability. While undertaking these efforts at home, Tanzania is also championing democratic values with the East African Community, the Southern African Development Community, and the African Union, and with the international community system as well. In that connection, I would like to assure this gathering that the United Republic of Tanzania will continue supporting democracy, human rights, and good governance at home and abroad. And we are looking into the issue of returning to the open government partnership at the earliest opportunity. Your Excellencies, in conclusion, once again, thank you very much for availing me this opportunity to share my message with the Summit for Democracy 2023. I believe this community of democracies can and must provide solutions to our common challenges, since our diversity is one aspect of our important and enduring strength. Together, let's make this world a better place. I thank you very much for your attention.
Iraq.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد رئيس الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, President of the United States of America, Excellencies, peace be upon you all. Iraq is a country of many ethnicities, religions, and sects. In this demographically diverse nation, various political groupings share power and participate in state administration and governance. This process of representation takes place in periodic elections in which representatives of the people are elected. The era of one group dominating over another on grounds of race, religion, or sect is irrevocably over. We all share the opinion that Iraq can only progress through participation and accord between the people of the country, which is a unique case in the Middle East region. Iraq's true wealth lies in its diversity of religions, ethnicities, and components. Our government diligently endeavors today to achieve these goals and preserve this Iraqi social mosaic. Our government has begun to build foundations that enhance democracy and provide legitimacy by preparing for local elections of provincial councils to be held next fall, which have been suspended for years. These elections will promote democracy and increase local and national ownership. Moreover, our government is interested in empowering women as we endeavor to grant women political and social rights. Under our government, women hold office in the most important ministries and government institutions. Iraqi women were able to hold more seats at the Council of Representatives than the gender quota allocated to them. Today, Iraqis are cognizant that there is no alternative to democracy as a safe haven that maintains human dignity. Despite all Iraqis' suffering since 2003, due to the transition from dictatorship to the realm of freedom and democracy, it was the Iraqi people who gave the political process a chance to survive through their determination and active involvement in political decision-making. That's why our government strives to meet the demands and aspirations of our people. Our government also attaches considerable importance to civil society organizations and supports their efforts in promoting and safeguarding democracy, human rights, the rule of law, and sustainable development. Wars and internal conflicts create an environment vulnerable to widespread corruption, which is the greatest danger to the body of the state. Thus, our ministerial agenda has placed combating corruption at the top of its 5 priorities. Today, our government is determined to eradicate corruption and pursue the corrupt wherever they are. Of course, this requires cooperation from all of us in recovering the stolen asset and extraditing those who are wanted for corruption charges. Thank you very much for organizing this important summit, and I wish all the summit participants more progress. Peace, God, mercy, and blessings be upon you.
Lithuania.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Much has changed since our last meeting. We have seen a free and sovereign European country, Ukraine, brutally attacked by autocratic Russia. This unprovoked and unjustified military aggression has shown us that to be democratic, one must also be able to defend democracy. While authoritarians are building economic, political, and military pressure to destroy our way of living, our duty is to stay united. We must stay true to our values and prepare ourselves for future challenges. We must show readiness to fight if necessary and to prevail. For my country, Lithuania, the great struggle for human dignity and democracy has never stopped. Having restored our independence over 3 decades ago, we know the pain of foreign domination all too well, and we intend to defend our freedom against those who seek to restore the old imperial order, recognizing that democracy is always tightly linked to security. My country seeks to promote democratic accountability, resilience, and stability. Having initiated a cohort on resisting authoritarian pressure, Lithuania is ready to continue this work. Lithuania is giving protection to democratic activists, political refugees, and human rights defenders from Belarus and Russia. Lithuania is pushing hard for war crimes accountability in international organizations. And Lithuania will stay active both as a member of the Human Rights Council and as a future chair of the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers. For us, they can no longer be business as usual. As proud members of the international community, we are ready to take on more responsibility. That is why Lithuania has already devoted at least 1.5% of GDP for Ukraine to reach victory on the battlefield and to rebuild the country. Today I call on every freedom-loving nation to maintain unity and build resilience. Let us all protect and defend democratic values.
Finland.
Mr. President, at the first summit for democracy, I stressed that democracy must be defended wherever it is under threat. I wish to underscore this even more forcefully today. With Russia's unlawful war of aggression against Ukraine, that threat became very real in Europe in 2022. 1 year on, Ukraine continues to fight for its independence. At the same time, it stands up for democracy and freedom. Not only for itself, but for all of us around the world. And Ukraine has not been left alone. The common response of democracies has been swift and strong. This second summit for democracy gives us an opportunity to strengthen our cooperation further and to track the progress we have made in our own countries. Let me highlight a few examples from Finland. At the end of last year, the government of Finland approved a new government resolution on democracy policy. We continue to protect the integrity of elections, which are a cornerstone of our democracy. As it happens, we are just approaching our parliamentary election on Sunday this week. Ultimately, it is the Finnish civil society that upholds the high standard for our democracy. For any healthy democracy, it is essential to safeguard equal participation. Furthermore, the role of a free and pluralistic media is key. We should not take these elements for granted. Finland has also taken important steps forward under the National Anti-Corruption Strategy and Action Plan, as well as with establishing a transparency register. Mr. President, we applaud the many democracy cohorts established after the first summit. Finland supports joint action in these themes with a particular focus on gender equality, the rule of law, and technology and democracy. Finland remains committed to defend and support democracy with our many partners in the European Union, in the United Nations, and in initiatives such as the Summit for Democracy.
Romania.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, when we came together for the first Summit for Democracy, we committed to protect the values we believe in for our citizens' safety and well-being. Later on, in 2022, democracy was under attack in the most blatant way through Russia's illegal war against Ukraine. Our commitments are thus even more relevant today. Democracies need to stand united in defending their shared values and vision on the world. We have already proven our strength by coming together in support of Ukraine, but also by stepping up our own capacity to resist mounting menaces. We have shown that our democracies are durable and resilient and must remain so. This also translates in continuing our work at home in areas which remain essential in strengthening our democracies. I will briefly present some of Romania's main achievements since our last summit. Romania's efforts to combat extremism have been integrated in a national strategy with a focus on prevention, education, threat assessment, and gathering relevant data on hate crimes. Romania coordinates, together with Sweden, a cohort on gender equality as a prerequisite for democracy. Its results will stimulate further initiatives. We have also resolutely pursued the fight against human trafficking for many years now. The national mechanism for identification and referral of victims was reviewed last year. We took extra measures to protect more than 3.6 million refugees from Ukraine who entered Romania. One sensitive issue refers to children protection, and this is why the registration of all children from Ukraine, with support from UNICEF, includes a child trafficking screening. Ladies and gentlemen, Romania grew in the past 3 decades into a bridgehead of democracy in our region and beyond. We will continue to work and protect our achievements. We are not alone. Together with democracies around the world, we now need to support the fight of all those striving for a democratic future in which they can make their own choices. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you and your delegations fruitful debates and deliberations.
Moldova.
Distinguished leaders and fellow citizens of the world, as we gather for the second Summit for Democracy, we are reminded of the urgency of our shared mission to build a more just, fair, and sustainable world for all. In this spirit, I'm proud to share with you the progress made on the national commitments of the Republic of Moldova in this year of action, as we reinforce our efforts to defend and consolidate our democracy at home. We embark on this path at a critical moment in history, as we are confronted with unprecedented crises: energy, economy, a war on our border. Despite these challenges, we are committed to change. To strengthen democracy in Moldova, we work to build people's trust in our state, in our public institutions. We focus primarily on 3 goals: reforming the judiciary, strengthening anti-corruption bodies and cleaning up public institutions, and countering illegal financing of political parties. Last year, we set the basis to ensure that Moldova's judges and prosecutors are competent, independent, impartial, and abide by the law. We started an extraordinary evaluation of the ethical and financial integrity of judges and prosecutors, of candidates to self-governing bodies. The Parliament also passed legislation intended to decrease the political influence over the selection and promotion of judges and strengthen independence of the judiciary. We embarked on strengthening anti-corruption bodies and cleaning up our public institutions. Throughout 2022, we appointed honest professionals in leadership positions in key anti-corruption institutions. We continue working on strengthening existing mechanisms meant to ensure accountability and integrity in the justice sector. It takes time, but we will build a justice system that the society can trust. We have reinforced mechanisms of oversight and sanctions to prevent illegal financing of political parties. We have adopted a new electoral code. It strengthens the capacity of the Central Election Commission that can now oversee political financing and verify the income of those who donate funds to political parties. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just started. There is still much to be done. We are determined to lead by example in strengthening democratic values and institutions. These commitments are not just words. These are actions that we take every day, and we are ready to play our part in building a more just and equitable world. Together, we can ensure that democracy remains the cornerstone of our international community.
Latvia.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, let me start by thanking the President of the United States, Joe Biden, for his leadership in bringing us together at the second Summit for Democracy. Last year, Latvia celebrated the centenary of our constitution that enshrines our democratic identity. Yet half of the century, because of Russian occupation, Latvia was deprived of its constitutional freedoms and rights. Unfortunately, a year ago, Ukraine suffered from similar tragedy. Russia launched a war of aggression against Ukraine, seeking to deny its sovereign and legitimate choice to be a democracy on the path to European and Euro-Atlantic integration. This was a choice courageously defended at Euromaidan in 2014 and demonstrated over the years with relentless commitment to reform. Dear fellows of democracy, Russia's brutal war against Ukraine has shaken the foundations of the international rules-based order. It is an attack not only on Ukraine, it is an attack on all of us and the core values of the UN Charter that we, the democratic community of states, respect and protect. We must hold Russia accountable for its crime of aggression. To achieve this goal, Latvia calls for the rapid establishment of an ad hoc international tribunal. Let me be absolutely clear. Ukraine must win to protect all democracies. Latvia will spare no effort in supporting Ukraine. Dear colleagues, to protect our democracies, we must strengthen our resilience at home. Last year, Latvia undertook serious efforts to advance media freedom and pluralism. We developed expert capacity to counter disinformation globally. In addition, Latvia adopted a new lobbying transparency law. Addressing the challenges of defending democracy, protecting freedom of speech, eliminating corruption, and tackling climate change cannot be the task of the government alone. It requires a whole of society approach. In this spirit, we recently launched the Academy of Democracy, a forum that brings together representatives from state institutions, municipalities, non-governmental organizations, and activists. At this critical time, the global community of democracies must become more visible and confident. Certainly, Latvia will be investing in its own resilience and helping other democracies across the globe. Thank you.
Israel.
Thank you, President Biden, for convening this important forum. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is and will always remain a liberal democracy with equal rights for all. This means individual rights, civil and political liberties for every citizen, Jew, Muslim, Christian, Druze, women, members of the LGBT community. Nothing will ever change that. Israel is one of the most ethnically, religiously, and racially diverse countries in the region. Our Arab citizens enjoy the same rights as the Jewish citizens. And I hope that one day all the Arabs living in the Middle East will enjoy such rights. Israeli Arabs sit on the Supreme Court. They're an integral part of our economy. They take leading positions in such diverse sectors as high-tech, government, healthcare, and academia. We're the only country in the Middle East that provides full equality for women, and we're one of the most progressive countries in the world for LGBT rights. Israelis have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom to protest, freedom to petition the government, and we have one of the most independent and free presses in the world. Our democratic freedoms, together with free market reforms over the last few decades, have generated enormous economic growth, making Israel a global technological powerhouse, and recently, even a net energy exporter. As befits a democratic country, we currently have a robust public debate about proposed democratic reforms. But let me make it clear, we will always ensure a strong and independent judiciary, and we seek to safeguard the balance of power between the three branches of government that is the cornerstone of democracy. We will continue to protect and guarantee the full rights of all Israeli citizens. Israel is and will always remain a beacon of freedom, a light unto the nations.
Cyprus.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends,
It is a great honor to address the second Summit for Democracy. Let me start by thanking the US government, which organizes this very important event. Today is a day of celebrating democracy, as well as an occasion for deep reflection on the multifaceted challenges before us. As this is the first time addressing this forum in my capacity as the President of the Republic of Cyprus, let me assure you of my personal commitment and readiness to work closely with all of you in safeguarding and promoting the core and noble values of democracy. To meet this objective, it is imperative that we first thoroughly identify the true challenges afflicting democratic societies in our era and listen closely to the concerns of our citizens. We must be brave in advancing further systemic reforms to forge a more inclusive society, achieving full and meaningful participation of all citizens on equal footing without discrimination or other artificial restrictions. We need democracy to be of tangible relevance to our citizens. We need a system which is more human and leaves no one behind. Excellencies, allow me to turn to the pledges made by the Republic of Cyprus in 2021. My country undertook a series of commitments which we had identified as crucial on issues such as gender equality, the protection of children, and access to education. I'm pleased to report that considerable progress was made on all of these issues, as well as in the wider context of human rights more generally. Cyprus is intensifying its effort to eliminate gender-related disparities by mainstreaming equality in all sectors and recognizing the impact of education and media. More attention is being given to tackling discrimination faced by people belonging to vulnerable groups, with the aim of ensuring full implementation of the existing legal framework and thereby safeguarding their rights. At the same time, we are cognizant that a lot of work is still needed. The intention of my government, as we embark upon our 5-year term, is to develop more human-centric policies at all levels. Policies which will target any and all types of exclusion and instigate necessary legal reforms guided by the principles of the rule of law. We harbor no illusions as to the magnitude of the task, and we have no instant solutions to persisting challenges. The work to safeguard and further strengthen our democratic framework and way of life is never concluded. That is why our determination must likewise never waver. In his thesis on politics, written almost 2,500 years ago, Aristotle noted that democracy arises out of the notion that those who are equal in any respect are equal in all respects. This is a most honorable notion and an objective of self-evident regards. Let us heed that call. I thank you.
Bulgaria.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is a great honor to address the distinguished audience of the Second Summit for Democracy, and I would like to thank the co-hosting states for this opportunity. Let me also express my appreciation of the continued leadership and commitment of President Biden, and to commend all summit partners for the successful completion of the first year of action of this important initiative. The brutal aggression of Russia against Ukraine profoundly changed our understanding of democracy as a value. The war threatens vitally important social and economic priorities. The democracy as our chosen form of government is again at risk, but so are our national security and the safety of our people. In this context, the effective cooperation among the democratic countries is not only a matter of choice, but a moral imperative. To effectively promote democracy, we have to change our perspective on corruption. It is not only a matter of abusing public resources. Corruption undermines state sovereignty, limits the capacity to advance the national interest, and deprives the citizens of their security and prosperity. For this reason, last year Bulgaria assumed the responsibility to facilitate a democracy cohort focused on the role of anti-corruption policies. Within this framework, Bulgaria already has built a strong partnership with a wide range of local, regional, and international stakeholders. Together with the other participating states and in cooperation with civil society actors, we have agreed upon an action agenda aimed at strengthening the role of anti-corruption policies as a guarantee for national security, stability, and sovereign policy. In line with the commitments for the year of action, Bulgaria took steps to strengthen the independence of the judiciary, increase the accountability of the public prosecutor's office, safeguard media freedom, and promote the citizens' trust in the public institutions. In January 2023, the Bulgarian parliament adopted a new law for protection of whistleblowers and voted amendments to the Civil Procedure Code and to the law on mediation, which will strengthen the administrative capacity of the European Public Prosecutor's Office acting in Bulgaria and will advance the use of modern technologies in the judiciary. Within the scope of its prerogatives, the Bulgarian caretaker government is strongly committed to preserve the resilience of our state and society in the fight against corruption. The implementation of the next steps of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, as related to the European Recovery and Resilience Plan, is underway, including important anti-corruption measures as reforming the National Anti-Corruption Agency and providing a mechanism for independent investigation of crimes committed by senior prosecutors in line with jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights. We count on the solidarity of our democracy cohort partners and rely on rules and mutually beneficial cooperation in the international affairs. Thank you.
Greece.
Honorable co-hosts, dear colleagues, democracy nurtures freedom and justice and sustains peace. Unfortunately, it continues to be threatened around the world. On the European continent, democracy is under brutal and sustained attack in Ukraine, a sovereign nation illegally invaded by an aggressor opposed to the democratic values we all hold so dear. The Second Summit for Democracy is therefore a timely occasion, not only to join forces in strengthening democracy, but to come together in its defense, whenever and wherever it is under attack or under threat. In the year of action that followed the inaugural Summit for Democracy, Greece has pursued efforts, both domestically and globally, to safeguard and further promote peace, security, human rights, and sustainable development. Our candidacies for the United Nations Security Council for the term 2025-2026 and the United Nations Human Rights Council for the term 2028-2030 are but one reflection of my country's determination to contribute to the strengthening of a rules-based international system. Domestically, the year of action and the implementation of our commitments since the first summit has been the overarching framework for my government's policies. We have upheld our commitments around the rule of law, accountability, anti-corruption, and inclusiveness in order to improve the quality of our democracy. Our ambitious reform program to promote better, transformative, and codified legislation has been delivering tangible results for our citizens, such as expediting the delivery of justice by reducing the number of days needed to issue court decisions. The paradigm shift in planning, monitoring, evaluation, and effective implementation has not only increased public accountability, transparency, and inclusiveness, but also encouraged people's participation. In addition, a number of national action plans on the rights of the child, the rights of persons with disabilities, and on gender equality, as well as, for the first time in my country, a national strategy for the rights of the LGBTQ community, are already being implemented. Moreover, Greece is one of the 3 countries in Europe that has incorporated the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in its yearly government planning, and regularly submits its compliance report to the UN in line with our commitment to sustainable and inclusive development. We have been working tirelessly to combat corruption through the National Transparency Authority. Our work is reflected in the corruption and governance indices of Transparency International, the World Bank, and The Economist, where our ranking has been constantly improving. And of course, the massive digitalization of services offered to the Greek people is another concrete result of our commitment to the fight against corruption and to ensuring our democracy is more effective, more efficient, and more accountable. Our work obviously does not end with the implementation of the commitments we undertook in 2021. Following our upcoming parliamentary elections, we pledge to continue working with all stakeholders and partners, both here in Greece and internationally, in order to safeguard our rules-based system and with it, the future of democracy.
Estonia.
Thank you, President Biden, for launching this timely summit. Democracy means freedom. Freedom from repressions, freedom from war crimes, freedom to decide over our own security arrangements and foreign policy direction. But not everyone in the world has been given a possibility to enjoy freedom and democracy, even if it is the people's will. Over the past year in particular, we have seen how much democracy matters, and we have seen how much some want to destroy it. Why is Russia waging a genocidal war in Ukraine? It started when Ukraine chose its democratic path. Russia does not want freedom and democracy to prevail. It is a direct threat to dictatorship. We cannot take democracy for granted. You need to care for democracy every day. If we wish to continue to live free, we must show willingness to take every measure to protect our democracies. And sometimes you also need to fight for it. Ukraine is a reminder of that. Ukraine also reminds us that freedom must be armed better than tyranny. And here we all have a duty to make sure freedom prevails. Estonia made commitments in the first summit to help to protect and promote democracies around the world. We have set our focus to supporting technological advancements and freedom of expression. We promise to support organizations like the Freedom Online Coalition, the Fund for Public Interest Media, Lifeline, and others. We have fulfilled all those promises, and our support continues. Estonia is also ready to take up new commitments at this second summit. During the past year, Estonia chose to focus on something we have first-hand experience in, making technology work for democracy. The Technology for Democracy cohort, which we co-lead with the United Kingdom and the NGO Access Now, has been a success. From the start, we decided together that our work must produce real tools that help democracies. We focused on two topics. Firstly, bringing attention to internet shutdowns around the world. Autocratic governments use internet access as a tool of control and censorship. Standing up for the uninterrupted access to the internet is essential because informed citizens are the gatekeepers of democracy. Secondly, showcasing the good that technology can do for the democracies. The state should be where the people are, and the people live their lives online. That is why in Estonia, our citizens benefit from the digitized economy and e-governance solutions, including digital services. This gives citizens more transparency about the governance, and it brings governance closer to citizens. There are wonderful inclusive e-democracy tools available. They must be made free and easily accessible to countries who want to implement them. I want to thank everyone who has contributed to the Technology and Democracy cohort. Our work will not end with this summit. This is only the beginning. Estonia will also continue hosting international events to bring together all stakeholders for democracy promotion. Last February, we hosted the third global conference of the Media Freedom Coalition. This year, on the 6th and 7th of September, Estonia will host the Global Summit of Open Government Partnership. The summit will support strengthening the engagement of civil society and will focus on open government in the digital age. I hope to see many of you in Tallinn in September. Thank you.
Botswana.
Your Excellencies, Joseph R. Biden, President of the United States of America, Rodrigo Chavez, President of Costa Rica, Yoon Suk Yeol, President of the Republic of Korea, Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, distinguished dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greetings from Botswana to you all. Let me at the outset express my gratitude to President Biden for his invitation to this follow-up summit to the one held in December 2021. This is a clear indication that our resolve to bolster democracy worldwide, fight corruption, and promote respect for human rights is gaining greater momentum. Your Excellencies, co-hosts of this summit, I thank you for your collective action to building a stronger global democracy coalition toward a shared vision for peace and prosperity of our peoples. Your Excellencies, I am greatly humbled to lead a country that is regarded as a beacon of democracy in Africa. In my statement to the December 2021 summit, I talked about how Botswana's democracy was centered around the Khotla system, our traditional system of consultation, of free speech, and mutual respect. I therefore stand on the shoulders of our forefathers who laid this lasting foundation for a flourishing democracy today. This session grants us a great opportunity to reflect on progress made since the previous summit, and I am glad to report on some of our efforts during the year of action. During the December 2021 summit, Botswana pledged to host a two-day democracy summit in Botswana in the first half of 2022 under the theme Constitutionalism and Democratic Consolidation in Africa. It is gratifying to confirm that indeed the government of Botswana and the National Democratic Institute, NDI, with its partners, Open Society Foundations, Africa, Kofi Annan Foundation, Katiba Institute, Afrobarometer, Toure, La Page, Gravitas, African Network of Constitutional Lawyers, Presidential Precinct, and the University of Botswana hosted the summit from 6th to the 8th of July 2022 in Gaborone. The vision for the Gaborone Summit was to promote democratic progress and resilience while countering democratic backsliding and the erosion of constitutionalism across the continent. The summit also celebrated Botswana's efforts to champion democracy in Africa. This summit was a major milestone that we had pledged, and its key outcome was the adoption of the Gaborone Declaration, which, among others, acknowledged Africa's citizens' support for constitutionalism and presidential term limits. Signatories to the declaration called on the African Union, the regional economic communities, the RECs, the democratic African governments to enact reforms and adopt guidelines to ensure that constitutional amendment processes foster respect for democratic rights and are based on a national consensus. An urgent call has been made to African leaders to build trust and create stable, thriving societies that consolidate constitutionalism and the rule of law, allow for greater predictability in governance, economic and human development, and the peaceful transfer of executive power. We greatly encourage the use of the Gaborone Declaration as an advocacy tool to empower citizens to hold their leaders accountable and to fully embrace term limits and to recommit to consolidating democratic progress. It is our earnest hope that the widespread circulation and signing of the Declaration of Principles will garner greater support for constitutionalism, the rule of law, and a sustainably stable, secure, and prosperous democratic future of our continent. Your Excellencies, I'm also pleased to update that the government of Botswana has been actively participating in the Democracy Summit focal group through our focal person at the Director General level. We thank our gracious hosts for this immense opportunity to be part of a democracy cohort and ensure follow-up on our summit commitments and engagements, and I look forward to the outcome of their work. Finally, let me commend the United States government for the concerted effort of being more inclusive and collaborative in advancing democracy. These efforts are without question consistent with Botswana's domestic and foreign policy principles of being a beacon of democracy in Africa. I thank you.
Denmark.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Danish democratic thinker Hal Koch once wrote, "Democracy is not a victory that has been won, but a battle continually waged. It's not a final outcome, but a task constantly revisited." Looking at the world today, we are facing a historic test of democracy. Russia's brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine is a direct attack on the fundamental values of the free world, our way of living, the rule-based international order, the right to choose your own way. Every day, brave Ukrainians risk their lives to defend these values. And around the world, millions of people fight back as autocrats try to silence, suppress, and censor. Technology is the very center of this battle. On one side, anti-democratic forces have new powerful tools, shutting down the internet, using technologies. On the other side, technology is also part of the solution. In Iran, in Myanmar, in Russia, we see protesters standing up for their rights with nothing but courage in their hearts and a smartphone in their hands. And social media have proven effective in sharing information, organizing protests, countering misinformations. As leaders, it is our task to ensure that tech supports the democratic process, also in our own countries, of course. Denmark is proud to contribute to the global push for democracy. With Tech for Democracy, we have railed more than 200 partners around a new vision for a democratic digital future. And with the new Digital Democracy Initiative, we are committed to help people fighting for democracy around the world, to make the voices heard. All this to make tech work for democracy and human rights, not against it. Thank you, President Biden, for taking leadership on this important agenda. Denmark will remain a strong partner, and I promise you, in this constant and never-ending fight that is democracy, we will not resign. Thank you.
Austria.
Dear President Biden, dear fellow heads of states and governments, ladies and gentlemen, democracy, human rights, and our rules-based international order are increasingly under threat. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is the most recent and most blatant attack. There are also other threats to democracy, like disinformation campaigns or hybrid operations. They undermine people's trust in state institutions and in democracy itself. As President Biden rightly pointed out, we must prove that democracy still works, both at home and abroad. Austria is and will remain a steadfast partner in this endeavor. Our goal is simple. We want to ensure that our children and grandchildren grow up in free and open societies, societies in which freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and all fundamental rights are granted. In November 2021, Austria participated in the first Summit for Democracy. Since then, we have taken concrete steps to implement the commitments made at the summit. In November 2022, we organized a high-level conference on the safety of journalists in Vienna, because a free media is the lifeblood of democracies. In Afghanistan, we organized special security trainings for journalists and provided funding for a UN Women project supporting female journalists. Despite extremely difficult conditions, these projects continue to be implemented. In Belarus, we contributed to drafting a constitution in coordination with both civil society and legal experts. We supported the International Accountability Platform and will continue to do so. In Albania, we support projects and good governance, anti-corruption, and better functioning of the public sector. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights. Austria will organize a high-level human rights symposium in Vienna in June. 30 years after this landmark meeting, we see increasing pushback against the universality of human rights. State and non-state actors around the world want to dismantle the progress made over the last decades. We cannot, we will not allow that to happen. Together, we will ensure that democracies continue to deliver for all our people. Thank you.
North Macedonia.
Distinguished Excellencies, dear friends, on the onset, allow me to express my gratitude to the President Biden for the initiative to convene the second Global Summit for Democracy, which is happening at a critical time for democracy worldwide. At the first summit in December 2021, we had the opportunity to renew our commitment to the revitalization of democratic values and institutions in an era of uncertainty. Led by our experience in building a functional model of multi-ethnic democracy, North Macedonia committed itself to three key things. First, defending our way of life from authoritarian states and entities. Second, strengthening the fight against corruption and organized crime. And third, protecting human rights and freedoms through building responsible institutions, dynamic civil society, and free media. Unfortunately, 2 months later, we witnessed the brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine. Even those who had been skeptical up to that moment realized that the threats facing democracy today are tangible and bloody reality. Ukraine has become a battlefield where democracy and freedom collide with tyranny. The effects of this violent attempt to discard the democratic will and prevent the European future of that country are very much felt in the region of Southeast Europe. In the light of the war in Ukraine, there is no doubt that the commitments made during the first Global Summit for Democracy bear much more weight today, and their swift and concrete implementation should be an absolute priority. Effective institutions play a central role in defending our values. The effectiveness of the European reform depends on us, but also on the determination of the Union itself to enable accelerated integration of North Macedonia and the entire region of the Western Balkans. It is the crucial prerequisite for building democratic societies and institutions resilient to populism and authoritarianism. Dear friends, a world in which the aggressor is stronger than peace and democracy would be a dangerous place to live. Only democracy ensures peace, security, and prosperity, and builds free societies of equal citizens. I thank you.
Spain.
We are living through defining times for democracy. The Russian aggression has underlined the value of democracy and human rights. It has made clear that democracy and the rules-based international order are indispensable to advancing peace, prosperity, and security. Therefore, we must step up our efforts to defend democracy globally, proactively, and decisively. My country, Spain, is committed to these goals, and I am glad to say that we have fulfilled the commitments we made in 2021 at the first Summit for Democracy. First, we have increased transparency within our government. Spain is a vibrant and solid democracy, but keep working to improve it. Accountability is essential if we want to engage citizens and fight against political disaffection. That is why I launched an accountability mechanism on the progress of government. Essentially, we report every 6 months the rate of implementation on commitments made by the government. Second, we have been working with many countries in Latin America on different initiatives. Over the past 2 years, we have organized a series of inclusive dialogues about the challenges democracy faces. Over 120 social, political, economic actors from local, state, and regional levels from 20 countries have participated. Based on these dialogues and moving from words to action, our development agency has recently launched the Democracy Program. This is a new program that will be funded with 6 million euros to promote democracy between Spain, Europe, and Latin America and the Caribbean countries. Furthermore, convinced as we are that we need more women in leading political positions, we have doubled the budget for the Ellas Plus Fund, which promotes women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership in political life. Finally, Spain has co-led a cohort focused on the full participation of vulnerable groups such as persons with disabilities, LGBTQI+ persons, indigenous peoples, and Afro-descendant communities. For democracies to strive, it is essential that everyone has a say in them. This is particularly true when it comes to these vulnerable groups who unfortunately still lack many rights in different parts of the world. Spain has fulfilled its commitments, but we will continue to work in order to promote democracy.
Sweden.
Excellencies, I would like to thank President Biden for organizing this timely and important summit, gathering democracies around the world at a crucial time for global freedom. Authoritarianism is a threat to global security. Russia's illegal and unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a flagrant violation of international law and the UN Charter, make this very clear. But by joining forces, democracies can turn the tide. To be effective, we must lead by example. Let me highlight Sweden's progress on some of the Swedish commitments set out at the first Summit for Democracy. A National Human Rights Institute has been launched to reinforce the protection of human rights in Sweden. A new government agency for psychological defense has been established, tasked with countering foreign disinformation and contributing to strong democratic resilience. Sweden continues to be one of the world's largest donors for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. We have made upholding and strengthening democratic values and the rule of law a top priority during our current presidency of the European Union for a safer, greener, and freer Europe. Excellencies, there is no democracy without women's full political participation. Sweden co-leads the Summit for Democracy cohort on gender equality as a prerequisite for democracy. We are pleased that the cohort has presented recommendations resulting from broad consultations on how to advance gender equality to strengthen democracy. Looking ahead, Sweden is committed to supporting free and fair elections, protecting human rights defenders, and supporting pro-democracy movements. And we will help Ukraine win its fight for freedom against Russia. Creating platforms for collaboration between democracies has never been more important. The Summit for Democracy has provided an important framework for cooperation. Together, we will show that democracy delivers peace, development, and human dignity. Thank you so much.
Luxembourg.
Dear Mr. President, dear co-host, dear colleagues and friends, this summit comes at a moment when standing for democracies, all in its shapes and forms, has taken a new dimension. The Russian attack on Ukraine has shown us once more how important it is to protect our democratic systems from being undermined. The international rules-based order has taken a serious blow by the war of aggression launched by a permanent member of the UN Security Council against a neighbor. I strongly condemn this blatant violation of the UN Charter and call on Russia to stop this war immediately. The resilience and bravery of our Ukrainian friends also show us what fighting for freedom, for democracy, and our common values means. Let me take this opportunity to reiterate Luxembourg's strong support to Ukraine and its fight to preserve its values, democracy, and history. The war in Ukraine is a useful reminder for all of us not to take for granted all that we have achieved and keep working on improving it every day. The protection and promotion of democratic values and human rights are the very foundations upon which our societies are built. Although Luxembourg has a strong human rights record, notably regarding women's rights, support and promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights, gender equality and the rights of LGBTQI+ persons, we always strive to do better. That is why we are committed to combating discrimination in all of its forms. It is with that mindset that the Luxembourg government has recently appointed a national coordinator of policies combating racism, anti-Semitism, and hatred towards LGBTQI+ people. This is an important contribution to our national approach of preventing discrimination and promoting respect for diversity. Those concepts are fundamental if we want our societies to be peaceful, inclusive, and forward-looking. Luxembourg has consistently also allocated more than 1% of its gross national income to development assistance, with a strong mandate to leave no one behind. 1/5 of these resources focus on the empowerment of civil society, showing our commitment to work with all stakeholders. Democracy and democratic values must not only be protected at home, but also promoted externally. As a founding member of the European Union, the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and many other international organizations, our commitment to the international rule of law and multilateralism is well documented. As a current member of the UN Human Rights Council, we are taking this commitment very seriously. Thank you.
Montenegro.
Dear President Biden, dear Excellencies, I am grateful for the opportunity to be part of the second Summit for Democracy that promotes fundamental democratic values, gives new dynamics to partnership relations, and enables Montenegro to demonstrate its commitment to universal democratic principles in the spirit of alliance. At this moment, when we all feel consequences of the aggression against Ukraine, and until recently we are fighting the pandemic, it's our duty to actively work together to preserve democracy. Since the renewal of independence, Montenegro has been devoted to the implementation of necessary reform, and as a member of NATO, it continues to contribute to collective security. Facing democratic challenge, we remain truly committed to European integration as our foreign policy priority. I want to emphasize that Montenegro achieved concrete results in the fight against corruption and organized crime through a series of actions by the police and the Special Prosecutor Office. The recent election of the Constitutional Court judges sent a clear message that Montenegro is committed to strengthening democracy institutions. At the same time, cooperation with NGOs was intensified and concrete steps were taken for the sake of improving the exceptional legal framework. I will remind you that the last year Montenegro was targeted by several cyber attacks, which showed the weakness of the system, and therefore I would like to emphasize the importance of improving democracy through technology. The Computer Incident Response Team was formed, and necessary steps from Digital Academy and the Agency for Cybersecurity are taken. Support for free and independent media is a crucial condition for the functioning of democratic societies. Therefore, we continue our full commitment to fight for freedom of speech and environmental in which journalists will feel very safe. The most important task is to ensure the rule of law by securing equality of citizens, building stronger and more efficient institutions, preserving security, fighting corruption and organized crime, strengthening the independence of the judiciary, improving the position of members of minorities, and supporting free and independent media. Dear colleagues, I hope and expect that we will be part of our collective voice that will reach every corner of our planet. We have a dream of a world in which democracy prevails. Montenegro is on the team.
Switzerland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank President Biden for convening the second Summit for Democracy. It is a timely opportunity for all of us to reaffirm our commitment to the principles of democracy and to strengthen cooperation on the international level. Switzerland is a multicultural and multilingual country. Our political institutions are founded on constant dialogue and compromise. Following the first summit, we embarked on a year of action. And today, I would like to highlight some of the progress we made. Firstly, we are fostering democratic participation. Without participation, democracy becomes technocracy. We developed an application that provides voters with non-partisan and objective information on candidates and political parties. Digital tools can be a powerful means to stimulate civic participation. Secondly, Switzerland has addressed corruption, for example, by promoting e-governance services. And thirdly, Switzerland made a substantial contribution to the newly created international public interest media. The freedom of expression is a fundamental right and key for a lively public discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we firmly believe that democracy remains the system of government best suited for meet the challenges of our time. It has a proven track record in delivering respect for human rights, resolving conflicts, managing ecological challenges, and contributing to equitable and sustainable economic growth. Democracy has the potential to deliver for all. Its promotion is at the heart of Swiss domestic and foreign policy. Switzerland stands for democracy. Thank you.
Slovakia.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, President Biden, let me thank you for this important initiative. It has once again mobilized democratic leaders across the globe to stand up for democracy and our shared values. Slovakia, as a member of the European Union and NATO, has a proud history of fighting for freedom, democracy, and human rights. Our civil society has played a vital role in strengthening our democracy. Slovakia welcomes synergies among the existing democracy-centered initiatives like Summit for Democracy, OGP, or other pro-democracy coalitions. At home, we brought them under one roof with a joint government action plan to better manage complex issues. In the year of action, Slovakia introduced several policies, including judiciary reforms and whistleblower protection. Our register of beneficial owners is one of the key methods to fighting corruption and money laundering. We are now working to make it a Europe-wide legal instrument to go after illegal money flows. We cooperate with the Netherlands on a support system for journalists facing threats. In addition to that, we joined the Journalism Trust Initiative that rewards fact-based media and helps people identify trustworthy journalism among fake news. We are also financially supporting media freedom and investigative journalism projects in Ukraine and the Western Balkans. Disinformation and hybrid threats endanger our democratic institutions. They must become more resilient. Slovakia continues to push for equal legal treatment of offline and online crimes and reasonable regulation of online platforms. Russia's war in Ukraine threatens the rules-based order, but also democracy itself. Slovakia will continue supporting our eastern neighbor and help Ukraine defend itself. Our humanitarian and military support is among the largest per capita in the world. Dear all, democracy always fails when we as politicians fail, when we seek quick fixes instead of sustainable solutions, when we choose populism instead of responsible public service and governance. Democracy will prosper and get stronger if we maintain our ability to focus on real problems affecting our societies. This is what will make our democracies fit, not just for today, but also for the future. Slovakia continues to do its part. Thank you.
Netherlands.
Since the last Summit for Democracy was held 2 years ago, the world has changed dramatically. Today, in Europe too, democracy is under pressure. That's something we should be concerned about, and indeed we are. This is a wake-up call. We can't assume that democracy is self-evident, that's eternal, that it comes for free. Democracy requires an ongoing commitment from us all. Naturally, since February last year, our attention has been focused on the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's a terrible situation, but we must not lose sight of our wider duty to defend the basic foundations of democracy. And I can assure you, in the Netherlands, we take that duty very seriously. Since 2022, for example, we have been co-chairing the Media Freedom Cohort, a crucial instrument in a time of misinformation and disinformation. It's getting harder and harder for people to navigate a world filled with half-truth and outright lies. So we need journalists who can counter false narratives with objective, factual information. To that end, over the next 5 years, we are funding 2 programs that will enhance the safety of journalists worldwide and sources and whistleblowers too. By protecting them, we enable them to do their vital work, standing up for what is just and what is right. But the problem doesn't stop at media freedom. Around the world, civil society organizations and human rights defenders are under pressure too. We must challenge that trend because these organizations and individuals are essential to any democracy. So the Netherlands is also supporting 2 programs aimed at bolstering their security. Lastly, I'd like to mention one of the main topics of this summit, combating corruption. As the past year has shown, corruption is a problem in the Netherlands too. It's a problem we are confronting head-on. Both in the Netherlands and beyond, we are working to develop an effective approach. We joined forces with Canada and Ecuador, for instance, to identify key anti-corruption proposals. We have now discussed these with over 50 countries, and we will continue the discussion at the next meeting in Quito. This summit will show where we stand and encourage us all to take concrete actions, because words alone are not enough. Democracy is never perfect. It has weaknesses, and it certainly faces threats. But it is also incredibly resilient. Around the world, people are committed to democracy, and they are waiting for us to act.
Poland.
Mr. President, leaders of the democratic world, ladies and gentlemen. During the first Summit for Democracy, I talked about the situation in Belarus under Lukashenko's regime and suppression of the democratic opposition. The following months brought us a hybrid operation, a migrant crisis on Poland's eastern border orchestrated by Minsk with Kremlin's support. It was a prelude to an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. This Russian war against Ukraine has revealed the true face of Putin's regime, the atrocities and brutality against Ukrainian civilian population, an attempt to erase the whole nation. An economic, energy and food crisis emerging all over the world as a consequence of Russian actions. The Ukrainians have bravely resisted Russian assaults. I'm proud that Poles and other nations have offered the Ukrainian people a strong support because a free and democratic world is not a theoretical concept, but a real community of values. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland's leading role in response to Russia's invasion has been unprecedented. We have been at the forefront of calls for sending aid, including the military one, to Ukraine to help fight off the Russian aggressor and to impose severe sanctions on Russia. Since the invasion began, Poland has welcomed more Ukrainian refugees than any other European country. Not in refugee camps, but in our homes. Today, Poland is home to more than 3.5 million Ukrainians. OECD data showed that last year Poland spent over $9 billion, 1.5% of its GDP, on humanitarian aid for Ukraine. We also act as a logistic hub for aid transfers from other countries. Poland pledges to continue its support for Ukraine in order to stop Russian neo-imperialism. We will also continue our support to democratic Belarus. Ukraine has never been and will never be alone in its fight, because Ukrainians are fighting for all of us. Unless stopped, Russia is ready to go much further. Thank you.
Slovenia.
I'm very pleased to be part of this year's Summit for Democracy, and let me thank President Biden for this timely initiative. As a first-time politician, I came to the world of politics with no political baggage. As a human rights lawyer, I lived a life in which the power of argument was the order of the day. I am terrified to see how in international politics the power of argument loses the battle against the argument of power. We in Europe have war. The war is different. It is a straightforward global challenge to democracy and the rule of law. The Charter of the United Nations, the Constitution of the world, was blatantly violated by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. But in order to understand how much democracy is under threat, we must look beyond Ukraine. War is costly everywhere, while it lasts and when it ends. Efforts to rebuild war-torn societies are costly. Efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change are costly too. Those who flee areas destroyed by war and lost due to climate change need to find a place to live in dignity. The first concern among people who are victims of our wrongdoing is how to secure food, water, and shelter. Their priority may not be necessarily the fight for democracy, but to fight for survival. If we, democracies, will not deliver it to them, someone else will. This being said, there are other things that demand our full attention. We must think about the future and what progress in science and technology brings us. We put our trust in bright and skilled people, but let us not miss the big picture here. Bright men and women seek their fortunes in rich parts of the world. Yet we don't need them only in capitals and global financial hubs. We need to attract them to less developed states and rural areas. That is where democracy is most vulnerable. We know that ignored and neglected people living on their periphery can be dangerous to democracy. Even the world's most powerful countries are not immune to this threat. Democracy requires leadership that pushes those policies aiming to survive the present and be ready for the future. Solidarity, globally accessible finance, science and technology, and respect for human rights. Freedom and democracy are not free of charge. Implementing these policies is not cheap, but it is the only way forward if democracy is to survive.
Norway.
Mr. President, Excellencies, Russia's attack on Ukraine on 24th February 2022 was a watershed moment. It was an attack on the rules-based international order, an assault on democracy and the values that underpinned it, human rights and rule of law. We have condemned Russia's actions in the strongest possible terms and provided extensive support to our Ukrainian friends. Their fight is a legitimate cause. It is of critical importance to the future of the global order. It's about freedom. It's about preserving the equal status of small and larger states. It's about defending the principles of sovereignty and non-interference. These are universal principles. They concern everyone and all states. We take solace in the overwhelming support for the Ukrainians that countries are now showing, in the way that democracies, small and large, have recognized the threat and are stepping up to the challenge. We know that democracies have inherent strengths. It is incumbent on all of us to reinforce these strengths. Like any organism, democracy needs nurturing. It needs custodians who believe in the big idea and are committed to protecting all the elements that are essentials for it to thrive. Rule of law, human rights, accountability, transparency, and inclusiveness. Dear friends, we must not be naive. Freedom is regressing globally. Democracy is under threat, both from within and from outside our own societies. We need to understand the nature of these threats and take steps to address them. To that end, Norway is currently assessing the state of our own democracy. We make an assessment that will be finalized in the autumn, and we intend to use it to improve our own institutions and strengthen our political processes. Internationally, we will continue to support democracy and human rights, to fight for women's rights and gender equality, to promote freedom of expression and independent media worldwide, to combat corruption and illicit financial flows, and to support civil society and those who stand up for democracy under threat. Civic space is the bedrock of any open and inclusive democracy. Without it, democracy dies. On this 25th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, let us all reaffirm our commitment to its aims. As history has shown time and again, democracy is not a state, it's a process. And we should celebrate and to the very least protect all those who participate. Thank you.
Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Excellence, Monsieur Joe Biden, président des États-Unis d'Amérique. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués invités, ce deuxième rendez-vous pour la démocratie nous donne l'occasion d'évaluer les progrès accomplis plus d'un an après notre rencontre du 9 décembre 2021 sur le chemin escarpé de la construction du système de gouvernement de la cité le plus prisé au monde depuis des siècles. Une fois de plus, nous saluons chaleureusement cette initiative du président des États-Unis d'Amérique. La fois dernière, j'ai brossé le tableau des principales actions entreprises par la République démocratique du Congo en matière de démocratie depuis ma prise de fonction à la tête de ce pays. Je réaffirme avec force ma détermination de faire de la République démocratique du Congo un modèle de démocratie en Afrique. Le processus de démocratisation de mon pays est irréversible et nul ne pourra jamais l'arrêter. Les réformes institutionnelles et législatives engagées se poursuivent en dépit des entraves multiples dressées par les ennemis de la liberté et certains autocrates impénitents qui continuent à naviguer à contre-courant de l'histoire. Sur ce chapitre, la jeune démocratie congolaise est confrontée à la guerre d'agression lui imposée par les autorités rwandaises, aux velléités hégémonistes et prédatrices, avec la complicité d'aventuriers terroristes du M23 qu'elle manipule à souhait. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués invités, il n'y a pas d'ennemi à la démocratie plus que la guerre, car non seulement celle-ci désarticule le fonctionnement de l'État, mais aussi elle inocule dans la société le virus de la violence, emmène son lot de catastrophes humanitaires et prive les pouvoirs publics des ressources nécessaires à la réalisation du bien-être social. Certes, l'histoire de l'humanité démontre que la démocratie s'est toujours bâtie dans la douleur et avec le temps. Cependant, aucun processus démocratique ne peut prospérer sans la paix, ni la stabilité et le progrès social. C'est pourquoi la priorité des priorités pour la République démocratique du Congo est à ce jour la fin de la guerre d'agression et d'occupation de sa partie orientale par le Rwanda et le groupe terroriste du M23 soutenu par ce pays. C'est seulement à cette condition que nous pourrions consolider les progrès démocratiques en cours et baliser davantage la voie à la pérennisation du système démocratique dans notre pays. En vue d'atteindre cet objectif stratégique majeur, il est absolument nécessaire que la feuille de route issue des processus de Nairobi et de Luanda et approuvée aussi par l'Union africaine et les Nations unies, ainsi que par les partenaires bilatéraux, soit intégralement appliquée par toutes les parties concernées, en particulier le Rwanda et le M23, qui bloquent sa mise en œuvre et ne cessent de défier la communauté internationale. Dans le même but de lever rapidement toute hypothèque à la démocratie dans notre pays, en tant que président de la République, garant du bon fonctionnement des institutions, je reste engagé dans les consultations politiques avec les groupes armés initiés dans le cadre du processus de paix de Nairobi en vue de leur réintégration dans la vie nationale. Ces consultations sont assez avancées avec une cinquantaine de ces groupes. Elles se poursuivront en 4e round dans les prochains jours en République démocratique du Congo. Pour sa part, mon gouvernement s'emploie actuellement à rendre opérationnel le programme de désarmement, démobilisation, relèvement communautaire et stabilisation, le PDDR-CS, un des mécanismes essentiels pour la réinsertion sociale des groupes armés et le retour à l'ordre républicain. Par ailleurs, quelle qu'ait été la rudesse de l'épreuve de la guerre à l'est de notre pays et la méchanceté de nos agresseurs rwandais pour qui la démocratie est le dernier souci du régime en place, nous tenons à l'organisation d'élections libres, justes, transparentes, inclusives et crédibles dans les délais constitutionnels. À ce sujet, je vous informe que la Commission électorale nationale indépendante de la République démocratique du Congo a déjà publié le calendrier électoral et l'enrôlement des électeurs a commencé depuis le 24 décembre dernier à l'ouest du pays. À partir du 25 janvier dernier, il s'est poursuivi dans les 9 provinces du centre et à titre expérimental à l'étranger dans 5 pays dont l'Afrique du Sud, la Belgique, le Canada, les États-Unis d'Amérique et la France, ce qui est une première dans l'histoire politique de notre pays. Cette opération atteindra bientôt l'est du pays, où se trouvent des centaines de milliers de déplacés de guerre vivant dans des conditions infrahumaines, situation qui rend difficile la poursuite des opérations électorales dans cet espace. C'est ici le lieu d'attirer l'attention des démocrates participant à ce dialogue international de haut niveau sur le risque d'entrave des opérations d'enrôlement et de perturbation des élections au vu de la persistance de la guerre dans la province du Nord Kivu. À cet égard, il est nécessaire de souligner que le combat que nous menons au Congo est aussi celui de la défense de la démocratie menacée par un pouvoir autocratique au Rwanda. Tous les démocrates du monde ont le devoir moral de se mobiliser pour le triomphe des valeurs démocratiques dans la région des Grands Lacs, gage de paix, de sécurité et de stabilité pour un développement harmonieux dans cette région d'Afrique. C'est pourquoi je saisis cette opportunité pour réitérer mon appel à la communauté internationale d'appuyer activement la mise en œuvre de la feuille de route issue des processus de paix de Nairobi et de Luanda sous la médiation du président de l'Angola, son Excellence João Lourenço, président en exercice de la CIRGL, son Excellence Évariste Ndayishimiye, président de la République du Burundi et président en exercice de la Communauté d'Afrique de l'Est, de son Excellence Uhuru Kenyatta, président honoraire de la République du Kenya, ainsi que les efforts inlassables du gouvernement congolais pour éradiquer le cancer de l'insécurité et du terrorisme à l'est de notre pays. Excellence, Monsieur Joe Biden, président des États-Unis d'Amérique, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués invités, il est illusoire d'espérer construire la démocratie sans état de droit ni respect des droits de l'homme et des libertés fondamentales. Bâtir des États et un monde marqué par ces valeurs de civilisation est par conséquent le défi majeur à relever et l'enjeu à gagner. La République démocratique du Congo est partie prenante à ce noble combat. Je vous remercie.
Germany.
Much has changed since we met at the first Summit for Democracy in December 2021. Russia has brought war back to Europe by attacking its free, independent and democratic neighbor, Ukraine. What Putin is trying to establish is that the rule of law can be overruled by the law of the strong, that countries are not free to decide on their systems of government. And yet, democracy prevails. Democracy prevails because it is resilient. Our open debates help us to find the best solutions, to correct mistakes and to get back on the right path. Democracy prevails because it is adaptable. Our citizens are able to choose their governments freely. And last but not least, democracy prevails because we stand united as democracies. We stand with Ukraine and will do so for as long as it takes. And in light of Russia's brazen attack on the UN Charter and the rules-based international order, we have strengthened our democratic alliances. At the G7 summit in Germany last year, we were joined by strong democracies from the Asia-Pacific region, from Africa and Latin America. Together, we agreed on ways to enhance democratic resilience. At the European level, we are making even better use of our neighborhood and accession policy to advance democracy, prosperity and peace across the entire European continent. Our joint decision that the countries of the Western Balkans, as well as Ukraine, Moldova and, in the future, Georgia, have a firm place inside the European Union will advance the rule of law, transparency and democratic values in Europe. And finally, we are also taking action at the national level. The German parliament is currently debating a bill that will promote democracy, prevent extremism and advance political education by supporting the efforts of civil society. With a dedicated initiative named after the German philosopher Hannah Arendt, we are assisting more than 1,000 media professionals and defenders of freedom of expression in conflict zones abroad, as well as in exile in Germany. Because freedom of speech and the free critical press are vital for democracy. It is true that the past year has held tremendous challenges for our open societies, and yet it has shown us what we, as democracies, can accomplish when we stand together. Today, therefore, I am more certain than ever that the future belongs to democracy. Thank you very much, and thank you, Joe, for this important and encouraging initiative.
Malta.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the ongoing aggression against Ukraine is a blatant violation of the core values of democracy: human rights, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and the rule of law. This summit comes at the right time to send a collective and unequivocal message. Together, we stand with Ukraine and uphold their right to peace, freedom, and democracy. Excellencies, since the last Summit for Democracy, Malta has worked tirelessly to deliver on our commitments and to identify new goals. We took decisive action to step up our fight against money laundering and corruption, implementing the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force. Through extensive collaboration with stakeholders and dedication, last June, the FATF recognized our significant progress, leading to Malta's removal from the list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring. Another priority was reinforcing media as one of the main pillars of democracy. A committee of experts on the media was established to analyze the journalistic and media sector, as well as to give feedback on legislative instruments proposed by government to Parliament, aimed at affording the highest level of protection to journalists in Malta. The overall goal was to consolidate the role of journalists and their significant contribution to the functioning of democracy. Anti-SLAPP provisions, as well as increases to penalties for crimes against journalists and limitations to libel suits against deceased daughters, will also be introduced as part of our commitment to advance democracy. Democratic values are quality, and the mainstreaming strategy and action plan was launched last year. This strategy aims at identifying and eradicating gender obstacles, biases, and stereotypes by strengthening the gender perspective at all levels and stages of policy making. Gender democracy is fundamental and remains a key priority for my government. To conclude, Malta is proud to be part of the Summit for Democracy process. We stand firm in our resolve to work with all of you on an ambitious set of commitments. Our action or inaction will determine our future, and I believe collective action is crucial for our future.
Serbia.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true honor to address you again at the Summit for Democracy. I am grateful to President Biden and our American partners for providing this important platform that has proved itself to be an engine room for advancing democratic values and practices over the past 2 years. The challenges we are facing globally require our united voices. The principles of respect for human rights, rule of law, and international rules-based order are to be echoed and upheld by each one of us. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has again brought to light the absolute necessity for universal and unwavering observance of international law by all. The Republic of Serbia will keep advocating for the consistent observance and non-selective application of those provisions and principles. The complexity of the global developments and trends, including global security, public health, food supply, climate change, and other challenges, calls for strengthening our national efforts under the united voice of democracy, equal rights, and opportunities for all. Both individual and global stability and progress require our national commitment. I am proud to share with you that Serbia has shown consistent commitment and, by delivering on its promises made in 2021, completed all of its pledges. Our first of 4 pledges was to improve the integration of the Roma community. A comprehensive institutional approach resulted in addressing the social inequalities and better inclusion of the Roma people in public institutions and other areas of civil society. The Republic of Serbia underwent a process of amending its constitution in order to strengthen the independence of the judiciary and the autonomy of public prosecution, as stated in our second pledge. The constitutional amendments and accompanying set of judicial and public prosecution laws adopted in the National Assembly had been previously assessed by EU bodies, are inclusive, transparent, and in line with European standards. Our strong and continuous commitment to fight corruption, reflected in the third pledge, resulted in the successful implementation of GRECO recommendations as assessed by the Council of Europe's body. The Republic of Serbia is fully committed to promoting regional cooperation, peace, and stability. We believe that a prosperous and connected Western Balkans provides an appropriate framework for further development and strengthening of democracy throughout the region. Guided by these ideas, the Republic of Serbia, together with partners in the region, launched the Open Balkan Initiative and enabled, among other 4 key freedoms, the freedom of movement for workers as one of the fundamental European values as stated in the last pledge. Ladies and gentlemen, Serbia is fully committed to democratic principles and European values. Full EU membership remains one of our key foreign policy priorities and strategic goals. The effort towards achieving that goal is not for the sake of the accession process, but for a better future for all our citizens. I firmly believe in the values and principles of democracy and our shared commitment to global progress. The gathering of democracies under the summit has generated momentum for strengthening and promoting principles and values which are essential for enabling our countries and people to live up to the best of their potential. Democracy needs each and every one of us, and a peaceful and prosperous future needs democracy. Thank you.
Czech Republic.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank President Biden for convening this second Summit for Democracy. In December 2021, at the first summit, our countries resolved to join forces to strengthen democracy and support human rights around the world. We did this because we recognized that our democracies were facing serious challenges and threats, both internally and from outside our borders. Unfortunately, only a couple of months later, one such threat became a reality when Russia launched its brutal war against Ukraine, violating the UN Charter. The war has caused incredible suffering in Ukraine, but also in other parts of the world. We must make sure that those responsible for the countless war crimes and other crimes, including the crime of aggression, are held accountable. The senseless war and challenge to the international order makes our work here at the Summit for Democracy even more important. Strengthening democratic institutions, fighting corruption, supporting civil society and independent media are all necessary to make our democracies more resilient. At the first summit, the Czech Republic made commitments in 4 different areas: fight against corruption, free and fair elections, support for civil society and human rights defenders, and media freedom. I am pleased to highlight some of the progress that we made on these issues over the past several months. On fight against corruption, the Czech government has approved key measures, including amendments to conflict of interest legislation or the bill on protection of whistleblowers. A new anti-corruption strategy for 2023 to 2026 was introduced in November 2022, and the newly adopted 6th National Action Plan within the Open Government Partnership Initiative includes several ambitious commitments. Our support to civil society, human rights defenders, and independent journalists is as strong as it has ever been. Over the past year, we have issued hundreds of emergency visas for activists under threat from authoritarian regimes in their home countries. We have launched a special program allowing many of them to settle in our country long-term and continue their critical work. This is accompanied by an increase in project funding. To promote accountability for gross human rights violations, we have created a new national sanctions mechanism. During the year of action since the first summit, the Czech Republic was pleased to lead, together with Norway and International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, a democracy cohort on civic space. The cohort has developed a number of calls to action on several key issues such as participation in national decision-making processes, support to civil society in exile, or civic space at the United Nations. I would like to invite other states participating in the summit to join those calls and help us make them into a reality. Strengthening democracy at home and abroad is a long and open-ended process, a constant work in progress. No country can ever say it's done, but if we work together, we can be successful. Thank you.
Liechtenstein.
Dear President Biden, dear co-hosts, thank you for bringing democracies together today to deliver on a very fundamental promise: freedom and self-determination for our people and a common set of rules we can all rely on. What unites us in this group is a deep belief that these goals can be achieved if all can meaningfully participate. For Liechtenstein, this means far-reaching direct democratic rights at home and accountable decision-making at the global stage that includes all voices, large and small ones. Our veto initiative at the United Nations contributes to that end. What also unites us in this group is the need to confront those pursuing other objectives. The rule of law anchored in the UN Charter is the bedrock for our collective security. It has been bluntly violated by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Today, we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, have we done enough to deter such behavior? Have we failed to protect our UN Charter? Have we, for too long, let leaders, unaccountable to their own people, commit international crimes with impunity? To me, it is clear that we need to do better. Liechtenstein stands with Ukraine in its brave fight for freedom and self-determination. It is a fight in all our names. Together with our partners, we will do whatever we can to deter Russia and to support Ukraine and others suffering the effects of this war. We stand with Ukraine in seeking justice for the grave international crimes committed against its people. And we support our international partners in seeking accountability for the Russian leadership in a special tribunal for the crime of aggression mandated by the UN General Assembly. Here is our opportunity to strengthen the rule of law and democracy for generations to come. Let us rally behind the cause of justice in Ukraine and around the world. In Syria, Myanmar, and many other places, people look at democracies to lead the way to justice. Together, we can do more to get there. We also need to keep fighting corruption, the authoritarian's weapon of choice. For that, we need inclusive and transparent governance, a strong and diverse civil society, and free media. We need to invest in the education of our people, provide opportunities for everyone to prosper and embrace new technologies while containing their risks. We need a private sector contributing to social and environmental goals and to fighting crime, as we do with our Liechtenstein Fast initiative called Finance Against Slavery and Trafficking. For the way ahead, you can be sure that Liechtenstein continues to be a principled voice for democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights and freedom for all.
Belgium.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a beacon of hope built on the ruins of a world shaken by unprecedented horror. The Declaration guarantees the universality of human rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This is the foundation of the modern international order, the essential obligation of all states. Yet today, so many people still don't enjoy these rights. In the absence of democracy, oppression of the past returns. Authoritarian regimes rise, and they undermine the political legitimacy of the government, just like the social and economic development of society. The resilience of our democracies is being tested by multiple global challenges with concrete local consequences. From the Russian invasion of Ukraine to its devastating effects on global food, energy, and finance systems. From the pandemic to climate change. From disinformation campaigns to attacks on human rights. Democracy and the rule of law are essential and complementary pillars of human rights. When the exercise of freedoms regresses, democracy itself is at risk. We cannot protect universal rights in the absence of strong democracies. An online platform was launched for citizens, civil society, academics, experts, and the local authorities alike to share ideas and opinions on institutional reforms and democratic renewal. A vital precondition for bolstering our democratic values lies in the full, equal and meaningful participation of women in our societies, and more specifically, our political systems. Many individual women have overcome the obstacles and are actively participating in political decisions. But more can be done to encourage women to take the front seat and to enhance sustainable stability and peace. On the International Women's Rights Day, Belgium organized a debate on the political participation of women to identify further concrete actions to take. Gender equality, the human rights of women and girls, and their equal participation in decision-making are also priorities for Belgium's mandate at the Human Rights Council. With our unique institutional architecture, Belgium has a proven record of dialogue as a source of peaceful solutions. We are ready to share our experiences and hope to join forces to promote peace in Ukraine, just like in other regions across the world. It is my strong belief that democracy, human rights, dialogue, and respect for differences are far more effective weapons than hate and exclusion. Let us bring a positive narrative forward, the narrative of the open and inclusive values that we share. Let me be clear, we will not back down on democratic principles and human rights. Today, I am glad to see that Belgium is not alone in this resolve. Thank you.
Italy.
I would like to thank President Biden for this kind invitation to participate in the Summit for Democracy and for this meaningful initiative. Over the last few years, the world has radically changed. The pandemic first and Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine afterwards have shattered our life. These two major events have posed unprecedented challenges and new threats to our democratic institutions. Democracy shouldn't be taken for granted. It is the result of a constant and joint effort. It is a tough job, a job in which I do strongly believe. Italy stands up today to reaffirm the importance of the rule of law and protection of human rights. Together with Europe and like-minded partners and allies, we have proved to be united in a spirit of solidarity towards Ukraine. And I am proud of Italy's contribution to support Ukraine's effort to fight for its freedom and independence. The Summit for Democracy is a great opportunity to work together, also to reverse the storytelling about the efficiency of the authoritarian regimes. There is no trade-off between efficiency and freedom. We should not renounce to dialogue and share different opinions in the name of efficiency. I believe that democracies can reach better results according to our principles and respecting our values. It takes time, but it's worth, and together we can absolutely make it. Throughout the year of Action 2022, Italy has developed several initiatives. We are fully and constantly committed to the defense against authoritarianism, the fight against corruption and criminal organizations, the defense against disinformation, and promotion of human rights. In this last field, I want to mention our efforts to ensure that freedom of religion or beliefs come to a major role when defining international cooperation agreements. Democracies have to face other new challenges. I'm thinking, for example, to digital and ecological transition. We need to foster a sense of shared responsibility among international organizations, governments, institutions, and the private sector to create mechanisms in which digital innovation and technological progress ensure that human beings remain central in the decision-making process. We participate actively in different international fora. We allocated 1.4 billion euro to support developing countries. At national level, our investment in this sector is the most relevant, with projects of billions of euros. In our view, this can be decisive also in order to preventing irregular flows of economic migrants, enriching inhuman smugglers and organized crime. More than our commitment today, our action will define and shape our society. As President Biden reminded us during the first summit, inaction is not an option. In fact, the costs of inaction are often much greater than any commitment we can make. Let's be engaged. We owe it to future generations. Thank you.
Kosovo.
Dear President Biden, dear colleagues, democracy is more than a mere system of governance. For the Republic of Kosovo, it was our strong desire for democracy that secured our path to freedom and independence. And by strengthening it today, democracy will pave our way for a brighter future within Euro-Atlantic institutions. At its very heart, democracy is fundamentally about having the right to choose your path, your future, and your destiny. The people of Kosovo have chosen their path. This year's Summit for Democracy has certainly been our year of action. With full force and fervor, we have worked to implement the commitments we set out last year. But the year of action has also been a year of substantial global challenges, with indiscriminate and flagrant violations of human rights happening across the world as we gather here today. Kosovo knows too well what it's like for an innocent people to be on the receiving end of a brutal and genocidal war, which is precisely why, without a second thought, we immediately imposed sanctions against Russia and have relentlessly supported the people of Ukraine. The immense suffering of the Ukrainian people serves as a stark reminder that there is no price too high to pay for freedom and democracy, and we will continue to stand with our allies to defend these values anywhere in the world. Over the past year, we have made significant progress in advancing our democracy, strengthening the rule of law and fighting corruption. We are implementing the national strategy on the rule of law alongside uncompromising and record-paced reforms to ensure accountable, equitable, and responsive governance throughout public institutions. Our efforts have been recognized the world over. Together with our friends from the Dominican Republic, we have co-led the rule of law cohort within the Summit for Democracy. In addition, according to Freedom House, Kosovo ranked as the third most improved democracy in the world in 2022, and in just 2 years has jumped 20 places higher in Transparency International's Anti-Corruption Index. Since we last met, we have worked tirelessly to advance diversity and inclusion as the cornerstone for the protection of human rights. We committed to establishing the Presidential Council for Democracy and Human Rights, and we delivered. This council has ensured oversight for our pledges and commitments by the highest institutions in the country and across every layer of governance. And its work will continue beyond the second edition of the summit. We are also proud to report the adoption of a bold national strategy against gender-based violence and for having taken meaningful steps to guarantee women's rightful place in public institutions and decision-making roles. A strong democracy is a democracy that also delivers for women. We have made significant strides, but as long as women continue to face misogyny in the workplace, violence at home, silencing in the classroom, or abuse while walking down the street, this battle is far from over. During this year of action, Kosovo has led the global discussions on advancing women's rights by hosting the International Forum on Women, Peace and Security, with over 500 thought leaders from 6 continents. And this coming October, we'll look forward to welcoming you all for the second edition in our capital, Pristina. Dear colleagues, our commitment to democracy isn't just a summit pledge. It's our everyday existence on the front line against autocracies. Our commitment has and always will be unbreakable. Our commitment to working with partners across the world to defend and nurture it is equally so. As President Biden recently said, it is in moments of great upheaval and uncertainty that knowing what you stand for matters the most. And knowing who stands with you makes all the difference. It is only through joining forces that we can build a future where democracy is a reality for all. Thank you.
Albania.
It is my honor to address for the second time this Summit of Democracy launched by the President of the United States. Thank you, Mr. President. 1 year after the start of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, this second round of gathering democracies around the table gains a new sense of urgency and importance. As a country that has experienced the darkness of a dictatorial regime and the lack of basic freedoms, Albania, from the moment it joins the community of democracies, has not only demonstrated a national commitment to build a new state based on democratic institutions, but has also persevered in the challenging path towards this very new destination in our history. We'll never be able to thank enough our role models and strategic allies, United States and EU, for inspiring us and assisting us in this tortuous new path. Though still very young democracy, Albania is today a proud member of this community of democracies, demonstrating its values and beliefs in the international stage, not just as a NATO member and the EU candidate country, but also in fulfilling special tasks like the chairmanship of the OSCE in 2020, or the actual mandate as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. On the other hand, improving our democratic life remains our top priority, and serving better our citizens is the most important part of our daily work. The digital revolution of public services in Albania, which began with only few services on our national platform several years ago, has given to our people the great possibility nowadays of 1,220 25 online services, or about 95% of all public services online, meaning much more transparency and no more bribery in the interaction between the state and its citizens. This does not mean that we can declare victory over corruption, but simply that we can prove our ambition, our will, and our persistence in fighting it with a clear vision of modernization. Our judiciary reform, which lies at the heart of our transformative reform agenda, is finally showing the nation that yes, fighting corruption is not only possible, but is doable. So thanks to such a thorough reform and to the brand new institutions of justice, what was historically unimaginable until only some years ago is becoming practically possible. Individuals connected to the power being convicted and indicted. Never happened before in Albania's history. As part of the initiative of the Open Government Partnership, Albania continues to strive towards a more accessible, more responsive, and more accountable government for its citizens. We are proud to be on the top of the UN chart for the women participation in government and to see the gap of the gender working force tightening steadily every year, from more than 20% less than 10 years ago in less than 14% today. A lot has been done in all fronts, but more need to be done, and this is why we fight for, by being focused on our new destination of fully integrated Albania in the Euro-Atlantic community, and by serving this high purpose with hard work, hand in hand with our big allies. Lately, we have suffered a very vicious cyber attack from a dictatorship, namely Iran, and we remain hopeful that Albania's allies, US first and foremost, will do more to help us protecting our country in a war that we can't win alone. Thank you all.
Croatia.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, as we gather for this second Summit for Democracy, our fundamental values and international order are under threat. Therefore, it is important to stay united and stand firm in protecting democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. It is especially important that we do so in Ukraine, where we continue to support the Ukrainian people. Because they're not only defending their own freedom, they're taking a stand for the democratic world. As the Croatian government, we have also stood by our own citizens in dealing with negative consequences of the Russian aggression and invasion in Ukraine. Through economic support packages, we have alleviated rising energy prices and inflation with a clear goal of preventing social divide, ensuring social cohesion, and protecting democracy. At the last summit, we called the 2022 a year of action. All commitments that we undertook that were meant to foster our democratic systems. But they also aimed to help countries around the world where those democratic principles are under threat for different reasons. In 2022, Croatia continued to strengthen its judiciary, having in mind that independent and efficient judicial system serves as a safeguard of the rule of law. We have significantly improved our overall anti-corruption framework, with a clear understanding that less corruption means more democracy. In the area of human rights, we are actively seeking effective ways to promote tolerance, equality, and combat all forms of discrimination. Through the projects we have helped to implement internationally, we supported democratic electoral practices, fostered education, and building up of institutional capacities. In the period ahead, we will intensify activities aimed at countering violence and hate speech, especially towards vulnerable groups and national minorities. Through the new National Plan for Gender Equality, we aim to further promote women's empowerment. And as the chair of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, in 2023 and 2024, Croatia will focus on the Future of Remembrance initiative. The goal of the Croatian presidency is to safeguard the contemporary memory about the Holocaust by developing digital solutions, promoting tolerance, implementing IRA definitions, and combating hate speech in sports. Finally, this year, Croatia has become a member of the Eurozone and the Schengen area, thus strengthening our institutions and international position. Our deeper European integration is the fulfillment of our own strategic goals, but it is also a strong message that the European project itself remains robust and relevant. Dear friends, today the rules-based international order is under threat, and international peace and security are uncertain. It is precisely now that it is imperative to continue strengthening resilience and our democratic systems and protecting fundamental values which underpin them. I can assure you that Croatia has been doing and will continue to do its share at this year's Summit for Democracy and beyond. Thank you.
Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed presidents and prime ministers, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to participate in the Summit for Democracy this year. All of us gathered here share the same fundamental values that characterize our societies and values towards which we must always strive, especially today when we are faced with multi-layered and intertwined global crises that seemed impossible only a few years ago. Therefore, allow me to thank you, President Biden, for this praiseworthy initiative of the United States, as well as the governments of Costa Rica, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, and the Republic of Zambia. This summit is an opportunity to reflect on the period behind us. The pandemic and Russia's unprovoked and unjustified aggression against Ukraine are the catalysts for slowed economic growth, double-digit inflation rates, and the deteriorating state of labor markets and food supply chains around the world. We cannot be blind to the fact that many autocracies and dictatorships seek to extend their influence to several regions in the world, including through the abuse of modern information technologies. We are witnesses of the spread of false information and content, but also of the growing abuse of private data by certain non-democratic regimes. It is in this manner that they are trying to weaken the security of citizens and society, especially those that are in the process of strengthening their democratic institutions. It is only together that we can combat such challenges and stop the efforts of those malicious actors who weaken democracy and the international legal order. Given the special context in which the countries of the Western Balkans find themselves, we must be aware that the aforementioned non-democratic trends bear even greater repercussions on our societies. I will remind you that, when we replaced the socialist system with democracy 3 decades ago, a bloody conflict that took tens of thousands of lives began in my country. We succeeded with the leadership and aid of the United States of America and European countries in preserving the multinational country of the three constituent peoples, Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, and all other citizens. Much like some European countries and regions that are founded on the principles of power sharing, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a democratic country in which its three main peoples share power in the collective institutions of the country and entities, especially in the entity of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. National and ethnic affiliation, gender, language, and other identity differences must not be a reason for exclusion from key democratic and necessary transition processes. In the forthcoming period, Bosnia and Herzegovina will, in order to strengthen human rights, harmonize its internal legislation with the highest European standards of human rights and democracy. By that, I also mean the electoral legislation, which must reflect the division of power between the three constituent peoples, but also include all national minorities, Jews, Roma, and all other groups of citizens in accordance with the Dayton Peace Agreement, decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, and domestic courts. Ladies and gentlemen, I will propose, jointly with partners, fundamental reforms of the judicial system in the coming period, with which we will strengthen transparency, the rule of law, and the fight against crime, as well as the strongest possible strengthening of collective and individual human rights. Comprehensive economic reforms await us, including in the field of environmental protection, digitalization, and numerous infrastructure projects. With your aid, I am convinced of the success of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the success of our work as part of this Summit for Democracy. Democracy ensures peace and progress in deeply divided societies. Thank you.
European Commission.
At the first Summit for Democracy, we took a collective commitment to show that democracies deliver. And indeed, the European Union has delivered in response to Russia's inhuman and unjustified attack against Ukraine. We delivered unprecedented support to Ukraine, 67 billion euros to help a country that is fighting for basic rights, such as freedom and self-determination. We delivered sweeping sanctions against Russia to make Russia pay for trampling on the international law and the UN Charter. And we delivered emergency aid to vulnerable countries hit by Putin's food and energy war. We stood up to defend Ukraine's and every country's right to determine its own future. But democracy isn't only challenged in the battlefields of Ukraine. Our democracies are also challenged from within and from abroad. In a democracy, power is given and taken away by citizens in free elections. We settle our political differences at the ballot box. But for democracy to work, there has to be trust. Trust in the institutions, trust in the system of checks and balances, trust in the media and in the freedom to express your views. When people lose trust, that's when democracy is imperiled. The opponents of democracy know this. They are spreading lies, planting conspiracy theories, and poisoning our public debate. They want to undermine the trust in democratic institutions. They are abusing the very freedoms we strive to uphold, to deceive and manipulate. But we are fighting back. We defined clear responsibilities for online platforms when it comes to taking down illegal content. We put forward a Media Freedom Act to protect media pluralism and independence. Our Code of Practice on Disinformation has become an international benchmark to empower fact-checkers and to cut revenues for those who spread lies. And soon we will have a European law to make political advertising more transparent. The opponents of democracy want to muddy the waters. Europe is responding with greater transparency and clearer rules for all. Our next step will be a defense of democracy package that will bring covert foreign influence to light. If foreign actors are secretly financing research or lobby groups to influence our democratic processes, their activities will be exposed. Our citizens deserve to know the truth. We will not let autocracies attack our democracies from within. Today, we all understand that we must fight for democracy every single day. That's the nature of democracy. We can never take it for granted. We must always take care of it and renew that bond of trust between the people and the institutions that serve them.
United Kingdom.
Since the Summit for Democracy in 2021, there have been two defining events. First, Russia
has sought to obliterate democracy in Ukraine, while also accelerating their malicious disinformation campaigns around the world. Second, democracies like ours have stood up. We have worked together to protect the Ukrainian people and to defend their rights and freedoms. We have shown that our commitment to upholding democracy is stronger than ever. And we have shown that we're prepared to do the painstaking work of protecting it. That's why we've exceeded the ambitious commitments we made at the 2021 summit. We've grown the Media Freedom Coalition to 50 members, all working together to defend journalistic free speech around the world. We're legislating to bear down on kleptocrats, criminals and terrorists who seek to abuse our financial system. We've harnessed the power of tech through our joint leadership of the Technology for Democracy cohort and our work on the responsible use of cyber power. And we will keep going further. That's why we're creating a new Defending Democracy Task Force, dedicated to protecting our democratic processes and institutions from foreign interference. And we're ready to support others to do the same. Democracy is the platform on which humanity's collective progress has been built. A world without it would be a world without freedom, without justice, and without hope. And so over the last year, we have shown our intent that we will not allow the future to be defined by authoritarianism, that instead it will be defined by democracy. At this year's summit, let's recommit ourselves to that goal.
Senegal.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank President Joe Biden for his kind invitation, as well as my colleagues from the Republic of Korea, Costa Rica, the Netherlands and Zambia, co-organizers of the Second Summit for Democracy. I take this opportunity to reaffirm that Senegal is anchored resolutely in our shared values of freedom, democracy, and respect for human rights. At our first summit, we made a commitment to continue implementing our shared ideals through our actions. In that spirit, I am happy to inform our summit that in the space of 6 months, in January and July 2022 respectively, Senegal held local and parliamentary elections unanimously deemed peaceful, free and fair by national and international observers. Following the same standards, we will hold the presidential election in 2024. But beyond the values of freedom and democracy which we defend together, I think it is equally necessary that we do more in solidarity to counter the perils that are increasingly threatening the democratic system. I am thinking of extreme poverty and social inequality. I am thinking of massive attacks and fake news on social media. I am thinking of extremism on all sides that take advantage of the virtues of democracy but do not believe in them, and even less practice them. And yet, democracy is both about freedom and responsibility. It demands that all stakeholders respect its underpinning rules and institutions and excludes any form of violence from the political field. Besides, the tendency of vote fragmentation shows that the future of the democratic system will also hinge on our capacity to be open-minded and accept dialogue to build, beyond partisan lines, sustainable consensus for the power sharing and stability that are necessary in the running of public affairs. Finally, experience has proven that in democracy there is no complete model to be used as a template, but an ever more perfectible exercise where we all learn from each other. This is the meaning Senegal gives to our summit. I wish us full success in our deliberations, and I thank you.
Portugal.
Democracy delivers freedom, and freedom is as essential to us as food, water, or air. It is an essential part of human condition. Without freedom, no individual can be complete. We need it to find our true selves and to achieve our full potential. Being essential to us as individuals, it's also vital to our collective life, to our societies. Art needs freedom, culture needs freedom, science and innovation need freedom. No country can be prosperous, inclusive, peaceful, and developed without a free society, without free citizens. There may be many ways to achieve freedom, but there is only one way to truly preserve and guarantee it: through democracy. That is why we must protect democracy and make it stronger every day. We can never take it for granted. Democracies are constantly challenged, and the menaces we currently face are clear. Growing inequalities, fake news, and hate speech are fuel to rise and dangerous populism all over the world. We need to act decisively. First and foremost, we need to invest in education. There can be no free democratic societies without conscious and free-thinking citizens. Quality education is key to achieve this. For that reason, we should encourage our youth to stay in school and democratize higher education access. We need to make sure that our citizens, especially the younger, have the tools to live their lives to its potential, to transform our societies through innovation and shape a better future. We must also fight growing inequalities among our citizens and among nations. Fighting inequalities will beat populism. We need to remove people out of poverty, but we also need to ensure that everyone can enjoy a dignified life with access to education, jobs, and housing. That every citizen can achieve the right balance between personal and professional life. Last, we also need strong democracies to face some of the biggest challenges of our time, like climate change. Climate change is also a cause for democratic erosion. It affects the daily lives of millions all over the world. It impacts all the society, generates conflicts, and forces people to migrate. The transition to carbon-neutral economies is fundamental, but we need to make sure it will be fair and inclusive, especially to the most vulnerable. We must leave no one behind. Through these actions, through our collective action, we will have stronger democracies and more freedom. It is our duty as citizens to be guardians of democracy and therefore of our freedom.
Iceland.
Dear friends and dear colleagues, Iceland made several pledges at the first summit of democracy a year ago, and I am happy to report that we have made meaningful progress on every one of them. In our capacity as the chair of the Council of Europe and the Nordic Council of Ministers, as well as in the Executive Board of UNESCO, we focus on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, all of which are under serious strain. There is a tendency to think that democracies perish as a result of violent actions such as military coups or aggression. But in our time, they can also be undermined by other overt means or wither away in enforced silence. We have witnessed elected leaders coming to power through parliamentary means who then engage in an authoritarian power grab aimed at eliminating democratic checks and balances. We have also seen non-democratic states with no interest in the promotion of equality or human rights emerging as major players on the international scene. We can debate whether it matters more that democratic states are becoming fewer or less democratic. Yet, as I said, democratic rights can be suppressed or they can slip away. And for this reason, they have to be fought for, nurtured and protected. And we need the multilateral system to weather the storms we currently face. Democracies must stay together to protect hard-won political rights and freedoms. Iceland has prioritized equal participation of men and women, which remains pivotal for democracy. At home, we are working on a pilot project on the equal value of jobs to ensure that traditional women's jobs are valued equally with traditional men's jobs. We have changed legislation on sexual immunity and harassment, improved the legal status of victims, increased funding, and worked according to a prevention plan against sexual and gender-based violence in primary schools. In recent years, there has been a serious setback in women's rights to control their own bodies, with stricter abortion laws around the world. In Iceland, we have passed a progressive abortion legislation. We did that in 2019, ensuring women's self-determination over their bodies. And online violence is on the increase. This is a serious threat to democracy because it discourages civic participation and prevents women and girls specifically from democratic participation. At the latest CSW, there was a vibrant discussion on the gender impact of artificial intelligence. Designed by man, algorithms are based on masculine values, but not least data, and they have the potential to reinforce existing inequalities instead of reducing them. Therefore, we need to secure women's participation in new technologies, research and innovation, as well as in STEM education. In those brief remarks, I have chosen to focus on gender equality, mention some examples of concrete action, and we will continue to share our experiences and learn from others in the cohort on gender equality as a prerequisite for democracy, and in the Global Partnership on Action Against Online Violence and Abuse. Finally, allow me to applaud President Biden for convening this summit. The safeguarding of fundamental human rights, democracy, and the rule of law remains one of the defining challenges of our time.
Liberia.
Excellencies, heads of state and governments, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the government and people of Liberia, I'm honored to participate in this second Democracy Summit. I congratulate President Joseph R. Biden and our co-hosts for organizing this summit, which brings us together once again in the cause of democratic governance. During the first Democracy Summit held recently, Liberia made various commitments in strengthening and safeguarding democracy at home and abroad. Those commitments are being successfully implemented. At that meeting, I pledged my administration's unflinching commitment to the defense of democracy, the fight against corruption, and the promotion of human rights and good governance. We continue to deliver on our commitments to media freedom and openness in legislative processes, as well as the elimination of harmful traditional practices. We have enacted a landmark anti-corruption law which gives greater independence and autonomy to existing anti-corruption agencies. We have also enacted a new anti-money laundering law to fight illicit financial flows as well as drugs and terrorism financing. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, honor our stewardship. Liberia has been consistent and steadfast on the path of democracy. New laws have been enacted to protect free speech, and the right to freedom of assembly has also been guaranteed. There have been no political prisoners or prisoners of conscience since the beginning of my administration more than 5 years ago. Our democratic institutions, including the judiciary, continue to improve on their capacity to respect and protect the fundamental rights of citizens and residents, and to strengthen accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. During my visit to Washington, D.C. last December, I affirmed my commitment to free, fair, transparent, and peaceful presidential and legislative elections, which are due to be held in Liberia in October this year. The peaceful conduct of which will strengthen our democratic credentials and showcase Liberia as a bastion of democracy in Africa. We remain unwavering in that commitment. I am confident that Liberia will remain a pillar of democracy on the African continent and pledge to continue to be an integral part of the global coalition in defense of democracy in the world. I thank you for your attention.
Ireland.
Democracy at its heart is government for, by, and of the people. It works on the principle that where there is power, there must also be accountability, and where there are rights, they should be universal, that people are inherently free. All democracies are a work in progress, often under pressure, frequently as perfect. As was once said, democracy is the worst system of government, except for all the others. It's our task as leaders to nurture and protect democracies, including in the face of new and profound threats. Since the first Summit for Democracy over a year ago, we have seen those challenges grow. In Europe, an authoritarian and imperialist regime is waging a war against a neighbouring state, ignoring the democratic wishes of its people and their right to determine their own future. With our democratic partners around the world, Ireland has taken every opportunity to oppose this flagrant attack on democracy, advocating for accountability and for Ukraine. If Russia's war in Ukraine tells us anything, it's that we can never take democracy for granted. And that's why today's summit really matters. It matters to Ukraine, it matters to every democracy around the world. I believe that vibrant democracies are the best bulwark we have against despotism and autocracy. Part of being accountable is following through on the commitments we make. And since last year's summit, Ireland has taken concrete steps to fortify our own democratic institutions and to support democracy in our international engagements. Democracy is about more than elections, but they are its foundation. So earlier this year, Ireland established an independent electoral commission with statutory powers to develop and safeguard our electoral system and run our elections. It will engage directly with the public to explain our democratic process and to encourage people to participate through registering to vote, casting their vote, and standing as candidates in elections. True freedom is not possible without press freedom, and Ireland has an independent and pluralistic media sector. To protect it, we established a Future of Media Commission, an independent expert body tasked with identifying a sustainable pathway for the media sector over the next decade and beyond. We're also reviewing and reforming our defamation laws. We know that xenophobia and hatred undermine our democracy, and in Ireland we're combating hate and intolerance through legislation and education. Last October we published a new law on hatred and hate offences, and in the weeks ahead we'll present a new action plan against racism. We also know that vibrant democracy around the world is enabled by a thriving society. Based on OECD expertise, Ireland is working with civil society across our International Development Cooperation Programme and our humanitarian assistance work. Alongside the European Commission and 13 other member states, we're also driving the Team Europe Democracy Initiative, which sets out to reverse democratic decline worldwide. Finally, through the Summit for Democracy's Year of Action, Ireland led a cohort on deliberative democracy and citizens' assemblies with the European Commission and our friends at the New Democracy Foundation Australia. Drawing on our positive national experience of citizens' assemblies, we've promoted innovative approaches to allow citizens' views to feed into policy formation and also constitutional change. With this work, we're demonstrating that democracy delivers. It supports and enables informed and engaged electorates that demand accountability and results from their leaders. Through this summit and beyond, Ireland will remain a champion for democracy at home and also as a member of the international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.